There are places so quiet they stop feeling empty and start feeling watched, where your own thoughts echo so loud they begin to sound like someone else's voice, where the silence doesn't calm you, it feels more like a judgment waiting for you to fail. Hello, and welcome to Torches, Yoga, and Mindfulness. I'm Lauren, a mindfulness coach, a storyteller, and tonight your guide through what happens when silence turns predatory. This is Stillness in the Dark, my special edition, if you will, a series of 8 stories, each touching on one of the skills of mindfulness, created and told by yours truly. Today's story explores the second skill of mindfulness, compassion and non-judgment, because sometimes we can't outrun the monsters. Marcus's mind spiraled as he packed his bag, and it didn't help that he was struggling to get his luggage together. None of his favorite clothes were clean, and he didn't have time to start a load of laundry. And he was just noticing he was out of toothpaste, so now he was going to have to stop at the store and make time for that. His frustration was building. Marcus was in his 30s, and he was the analytical type, an overthinker, and he was not one to ever talk about his feelings, and definitely not cry in front of anyone. But inside, he was absolutely spiraling. After the death of his brother, he couldn't stop blaming himself. He should have called more, he should have visited more, he should have said something or anything when it mattered. He couldn't sleep and he couldn't focus. He tried a support group, but he had already decided therapy was not for him. He didn't need to talk about his feelings, and he certainly wasn't going to cry in front of strangers like these other people. He remembers, though, they called it complicated grief. He called it punishment. Marcus finally zipped his bag closed and was ready to head out the door. It was going to be a 7-day trip. It was not going to be anything like he had ever done before. Never would he take time off of work, and it certainly wouldn't have been to sit in a drum circle with a bunch of hippies. But he thought this may just be what he needs to get back to his usual self, grinding away day and night. It was a silent retreat not too far away that he had seen an ad for while doom scrolling on Instagram one night. Nestled in the mountain, the picture looked so serene. The script over the photo and in the ad read, "Clear the mind, cleanse the spirit." There was hardly any hesitation, the convenient button right there where his thumb rested, ready for the next flick of the screen. But now he tapped, book now. His email confirmation informed him there would be no phones, no talking, no outside thoughts, just silence. He made his way off the highway and onto a dusty mountain road. The road was curvy, the forest was dense, it was too dense. His GPS lost signal 20 minutes before he was even supposed to arrive. He turned down the radio and rolled down his window, letting in the cool autumn air. He started seeing hand-painted signs along the roadsides, but they were only marked with symbols. A spiral on one, a single eye, and a hand on the other. Or was it a paw? It didn't have fingers, he wondered. He sees a turnoff up ahead about where he thinks he should be. And this road was only 1 car wide, and the tree canopy covering it blocked out the rest of the setting sun. He noticed the cicadas and the frogs he had been hearing were now silent. The road opened into a large circle drive, making a dead end right at the retreat center. It looked to him like an old monastery, tucked in between dark trees. No signs, no windows, just stone and wood and shadow. He pulled his vehicle over by some others on a gravel patch under some trees, stepped out, stretched, and grabbed his bag from the back seat. The email had said no phones allowed, but he just put his on D&D and tucked it into the bottom of his duffel bag. As he approached the door, wondering if he should knock or just open the door, a tall woman in floor-length gray robes stepped out. She had a white bonnet on, and she came to greet him, but not with words, just with a nod. She handed him a robe. It was the same soft linen and the same dull color. Another, smaller woman approached him. She was wearing the same robes, and she also had a bonnet on, but it was dark red. and she fastened a paper wristband around his right wrist. It read, "All judgment is violence." He didn't know what it meant yet, and he wondered if it was some type of mantra or if there would be different ones for each day. As he made his way past the foyer into the main room of the building, he noticed some of the others still in normal clothes with their luggage nearby, looking around a little confused. This made him feel better, a little bit more at ease, seeing he wasn't the only one. The room was cool, damp, and dark. He could hardly see into the corners. The only light was a candlelight chandelier in the center, and the last light of the day was straining to reach through the thick canopy. A few men in robes came into the room from a corridor opposite where Marcus stood in the room. He was standing there taking in the whole scene. They gestured to him and the other guests to follow them. Marcus and the other guests, they grabbed up their luggage and followed them down a dimly lit corridor. There were no sounds inside this stone building, and their footsteps echoed like an offbeat parade. Each guest was given a room with no mirrors, no books, no clocks, no nothing. Just a very plain bed Marcus already thought looked like it was going to be a nightmare for his back. There was an empty, plain desk across from the bed with a candle on it and a strange dark cloth folded neatly in the center. He was left alone in his room to settle in, but he couldn't help think, settle into what? There wasn't much to settle into. There wasn't a dresser, or any drawers, or even a closet for him to hang his clothes in. He unfolded the robe, inspecting it for a moment before pulling it on over his clothes. And he felt a little silly with his Chuck Taylors sticking out from the bottom, so he unlaced the high tops, tucked them under the bed, and got his slides out of his duffel. A chime rang out through the halls, loud at first, and then it trailed off before starting again. Marcus shoved his duffel bag under the bed and quickly opened the door to peek out into the hall. Other guests were stepping out as well, and the men who had shown them their rooms gestured from the far end of the hall for the guests to follow. They were led to another large room, this one with long tables. White cards lined the tables with each of the guests' name on it. Marcus watched as the other guests eagerly zipped around the tables looking for their own card and quickly jumped to reading the rules that were listed on the opposite side of their name. He thought they looked too eager, too childish. He thought how these more peppy guests weren't here for real growth or healing, probably just clout. Marcus found his card and took a seat, calmly inspecting the paper and slowly turning it over in his hands. The back side of the name card read, "You are here to be emptied, stripped of self. Words are weapons. Thoughts are thieves, and they will betray you if you let them. This is not a sanctuary. This is a cleansing. Judgment of yourself or others feeds the rot. It festers. It calls to what sleeps beneath. If judgment stirs within you, do not speak it, do not think it, do not feed it. Place the cloth left in your room over your face. Breathe until it passes. If it does not pass, it will be seen." Another gong chimed, and they were ushered back to their rooms. It didn't take Marcus long to adjust and get into the flow of things. The silence was almost holy. No one looked at each other, no one even smiled. The only break in the thick silence was the soft intercom voice that would chime every few hours, directing the guests to the next activity, and the echoes of the offbeat parade of footsteps. Meals were taken together in the same hall where they received the rules, but they were taken in silence, of course. The food was beige and mushy. There was never anything fresh, and the vegetables they did get were boiled into this lifeless paste, and the bread was hard and stale. It all tasted like absence, like they were being punished for needing to eat at all. Marcus found himself thinking, who cooked this? He imagined the purifiers hunched in the kitchen somewhere, blindfolded and spiteful, ladling gray soup into the trays with contempt. Marcus poked at the food with the edge of a spoon, wondering if this was meant to humble him. A flicker of superiority rose in him, a small tickle of disdain in the back of his throat, but he didn't notice it for what it was, not yet at least. But the taste of judgment had already settled in his mouth, and it lingered longer than the food ever did. Meditation sessions were held in a cold stone room. It was a circular room with seating against the walls, and the air smelled like damp earth and salt. The leaders, men who wore the white scarves and the women who wore the white bonnets, were called the purifiers. During their first meditation session, Marcus sat next to a woman. Though his eyes were closed, he could hear and sense that she was kind of fidgeting around a bit. He opened a left eye ever so slightly and saw one of the purifiers tap her on the shoulder and gesture to her to leave the room. He returned to his breath, hoping not to be asked to leave as well. He really felt like he was trying hard, but his thoughts, these thieves, were so loud. He thought the man next to him had a smug smile. He judged the food as bland. He even caught himself resenting the purifiers, thinking how calling this a retreat was a stretch. And each time he remembered the rule. He felt silly, but he really wanted to believe it would work. When a thought of judgment came, he placed that dark cloth over his face and he breathed until the thought passed. On the fourth day, something changed. During the evening sit, Marcus noticed a man across the circle flinch just the tiniest bit when the bell rang. It was just a quick twitch the whole room noticed, though. A purifier approached. No words, just a hand on his shoulder and a gesture towards the door of the room. He didn't return the next day. That night, Marcus heard something outside his door. Soft thuds and a dragging or shuffling. He pressed his ear to the wooden door. All he could make out is a whisper, but not words, just something like tss, like a hissing exhale, then silence. Marcus sat back on his bed, questioning everything. Why no mirrors? It's 7-day retreat. I'd really like to shave. Why no clocks? Why no names? He decided the answers didn't matter. He's done. He tells himself, you paid for this, you can walk away from this. He waited until the dead of night, politely folded his robe, and placed it on the foot of his bed. He slipped out of his room and out the side door of the main hall. It was a couple-minute walk from the hall to the parking area, and the forest was colder than he remembered. The darkness seemed almost as dense as the silence. He noticed a lantern glow off to the side up ahead and decided to follow it. It led up to another building, but this one was much older, all wooden, and looked almost rotted. But for the first time in days, he heard voices, and not that recorded intercom message. He peeked through the cracks in the wall. At first, all he could see were a bunch of gray robes. He moved around to the side to see if he could get a better glimpse. And he saw that inside were also the guests that had disappeared. There were 5 total, kneeling in a circle, their hands held together at their chests and their mouths moving slowly. And in the center, a shape. It wasn't a person, or at least not anymore. It was like some form of a body bound in layers and layers of the same gray cloth as the robes they had been given. It was soiled and stains in places like something was seeping through it. The fabric pulsed like it was breathing, but he noticed it may not be breathing on its own. The rise and fall aligned with the chants of those kneeling around it. It fed off their silence, off their obedience. The body beneath the wraps was contorted, hunched, low and bulging in unnatural places. It twitched in an unsettling way, and the sound it made, nothing but wet, stuttering inhales, as though its lungs had never known air, only silence. Those circled around it, like worshippers, rocked as one, mouths moving but making no sound except for the occasional hiss of an exhale. Their hands were held, clasped at their hearts. They were feeding it, not with food or blood, but with everything they refused to feel. With judgment swallowed and turned inward, with obedience that masked itself as devotion. It was ritual, but not sacred. It was wrought, wrapped in reverence. When Marcus realized what he was looking at, though he didn't fully understand, he gasped. They heard him from the inside, and the chanting stopped. All heads turned towards him, peering through the cracks from the outside. He gasped again and fell back when he saw their faces. The guest who had disappeared had no eyes. Marcus turned and ran. He tried to follow the trail he had come in on, but the forest was so dark he could hardly see his own feet. Nothing looked familiar, and he could hear footsteps of them coming after him. More than one. He could hear their breathing. It was heavy and growly. He kept running, and branches were snagging his pants, scratching his face and his arms. His foot caught on a small log, and he went down hard, landing in the soggy, slippery leaves and moss. He tried to scramble back up, but he felt their hands grab him. Their grip was so tight and cold. They didn't speak. They just lifted him, carrying him back down the path, through the shadows. Back to the monastery. The purifiers were there, waiting for him. Still, no one said anything, just pointed. He was taken all the way back to his room, and he heard the lock click as the robed men left. On his pillow, there was a new cloth, the one he had been placing over his face when the thoughts of judgment came. But this one was wet, dripping wet. The wristband on his arm changed. Marcus tried to remember if he had felt one of the ushers changing it. Now it read, "Your judgment has been seen." He lay down on the bed, mind spiraling about what he could do next, and he drifted off to sleep finally. The next morning, he heard a click that told him his door was unlocked. He quickly opened it before it could get locked again, but no one was out in the hall. He walked down the corridor to the main hall where the meals were served. They would not allow him in. Two of the ushers stood in the doorway, not letting him pass. No one looked at him, not even the other guests. He went back to his room. His bag had been lost somewhere in the excitement last night, and no one had returned it to him. All he had were his slides and a robe and this very wet cloth. His meals were brought to his room. They were always late and always cold, which seemed to make them taste even less like anything. He wasn't allowed to join the group meditations. He could leave his room, but essentially, he wasn't allowed in any of the others. At night, when he would try to sleep, his mind kept coming back to the eyeless faces he saw in that dilapidated building. He would listen for any sound outside his door, expecting them to come at any time to take him to that place. And for what happened to the others happened to him. He didn't sleep anymore. At night, he would see shapes shifting in the dark corners of his room. He could hear the forest whispering his name. His thoughts came fast and loud. He would still be reeling over one before another would present itself. They would tell him, "You're a fraud. You let your brother die. You always ruin everything." But still, he would press the cloth to his face and breathe, but it didn't help, and it smelled like rot, like decay. On the seventh day, the bell rang just once, and for the first time since his punishment began, the intercom crackled back to life. Marcus sat up with anticipation. This is it. This is the last day. They have to let me leave now. Words rang out through every room. "Those who have shed judgment may leave." He leapt for the door. This was it. He was finally getting out of here. He stepped out of his room and into the damp corridor and down to the door. No one was around. There were no ushers or guards, as he now thought of them. No other guests in their regular clothes. No one stopped him. No words, no gestures, just the door creaking open as he pulled on it. He stepped outside, but there were no cars, no gravel lot, no spiral sign, just trees everywhere, and an overwhelming feeling that something was watching him from the direction he thought that rotten building had been. The road he came in on was gone, replaced with thick roots and rotting leaves. Still he walked, no bag, no phone, no idea where he was going. Only the robe on his back and his slides on his feet. He walked for what felt like hours. The deeper he went, the quieter it got. Even the birds stopped calling. The wind didn't move. He kept thinking how he knew he was lost, but he could not find it in himself to turn around and go back. He told himself, this is his punishment. He deserves all of this. He would tell himself, you weren't there for your brother in the end. You weren't there for any of your family. You couldn't be bothered. Your career, it was more important. And now, this is what you get for pushing away your family, for hurting your friends, calling them losers, shaming them, and looking down on those for not having the same drive for material success. Unsure of how long he was lost in this spiral of judgment, he was quickly pulled out of it when he noticed something up ahead. It was the old, rotten building. He felt his breath catch in his throat. He felt like the building was pulling him in. So quickly he turned and went the other direction. He only made it a few yards out from where he had changed directions when he thought he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't dare look back. He just started running. He lost his slides and was fighting with the mud every step, sinking to his ankles. He heard the steps getting closer and closer. He looked back, expecting to see them closing in on him, but there was no one there, just trees. When he turned to look forward again, he was running straight for the rotting building. He stopped in his tracks. Now, the door was open, and he could see the purifiers standing just inside the doorway, like they were waiting for him. No words, just the same gesture. Marcus took a deep breath, hung his head, and walked inside. Some say he made it out. Some say he is still in that older, rotten building, chanting with the rest. And some say, if you ever catch yourself judging someone harshly, if you find yourself thinking, oh, I would never, then you might hear it, a soft whisper, dragging steps, or the forest whispering your name, coming closer. Judgment is subtle. It dresses itself in logic, morals, self-righteousness. But at its core, it separates. And what separates us feeds the dark. Non-judgment isn't approval. It's awareness without punishment. It's letting the thought rise and fall without needing to crush it. You are allowed to be exactly as you are. Acceptance isn't blind obedience, and non-judgment doesn't mean you abandon discernment. In mindfulness, we practice observing without labeling, but never at the cost of safety, instinct, or truth. All right, friend, that's my story for you today. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss next week, where we will follow Ricky, a teenager who struggles with confronting the beast in his basement. Thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me, friend. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and I will see you soon.